Forget what the movies told you about Wild West gunfights. The real West wasn't glamorous. It was brutal, with blistering heat, storms that swallowed men, and one mistake that meant death. Hidden, improvised, and forgotten ammunition was carried every day, quietly deciding who survived. These weren't props. They were survival. Today, we're uncovering 13 bullets and ammo types used by hunters, settlers, and lawmen. No myths, no Hollywood tricks, just the raw, deadly truth. So load your belt and meet the first cartridge that could kill before the fight even began. Pinfire cartridges, the strange European round that almost changed the West. Invented in France by Casimir Lefaucheux, the pinfire cartridge looked like an ordinary brass case, until a tiny metal pin jutted from its side. That pin was the primer. When struck by a hammer, it ignited the charge inside, creating a fully self-contained cartridge decades ahead of its time. No loose powder, no separate caps, just load, cock, and fire. After the Civil War, pinfire revolvers and shotguns flooded into the United States. European surplus poured across the Atlantic, sold cheaply to settlers, hunters, gamblers, and lawmen who needed something, anything that worked. You could find pinfire guns in saloon drawers, wagon trains, and even tucked beneath stagecoach seats. On a frontier where money was scarce and danger constant, affordability mattered more than perfection. But the design carried a hidden threat. The exposed pin that made ignition possible also made the cartridge dangerous to handle. A hard bump against a belt buckle, saddle horn, or wagon rail could strike the pin and set the round off. Accidental discharges were not uncommon, sometimes in pockets, sometimes in holsters, sometimes before a fight even began. A weapon meant to offer security could betray its owner without warning. By the 1870s, American gunsmiths turned away from pinfire designs in favor of safer rimfire and centerfire cartridges. Today, tarnished pinfire shells remain scattered in collections and dig sites. Quiet relics of an innovation that arrived early, promised much, and proved just a little too dangerous for the West. Paper cartridges. Before brass cases ruled the frontier, gun smoke carried the sharp stink of burned paper and sulfur. Paper cartridges fed early percussion revolvers, from Colt Navy models to the heavy dragoon pistols that weighed down cavalry belts. Each round was a fragile tube of nitrated paper, packed with black powder and a soft lead bullet, designed to burn away completely the moment it was fired. Loading was a practiced ritual. A shooter tore the tail with his teeth, poured the powder into the chamber, rammed the bullet home with the loading lever, and capped the nipple by hand. It was faster than measuring loose powder under pressure, but far more dangerous. Moisture softened the paper and spoiled the charge. Heat warped cartridges inside saddlebags and coat pockets. Worst of all, a stray spark or loose powder could ignite more than one chamber at once, a terrifying accident known as a chain fire, capable of shattering fingers, splitting palms, and ending a fight in an instant. Despite the risks, soldiers, scouts, and riders carried paper cartridges by the dozen. They were waxed for protection, tied into bundles, and light enough for long rides where every ounce mattered. In war and on the trail, speed often outweighed safety. When self-contained brass cartridges finally arrived, paper vanished almost overnight, consumed by the same smoke it created. Today, almost nothing remains of them. No cases to rust, no shells to collect. Only period manuals, burned scraps, and the knowledge that early firepower came wrapped in paper and danger. 41 rimfire, short, small, unassuming, and deadly at close range. The point? 4.1 rimfire short was the gambler's secret. Introduced for Remington's double-barrel Derringer, it fired a tiny 130-grain bullet at barely 500 feet per second. Slow by any standard, but lethal when pressed against a body. In crowded saloons from Dodge City to Deadwood, that was all that mattered. The pistol slipped easily into a vest pocket. Light as a deck of cards, ready to settle disputes before they escalated. Some gamblers wore them on watch chains. Others hid them behind breast pockets or inside coat linings, always within reach. The design favored concealment over performance. Accuracy at distance was poor, recoil snapped sharply, and beyond 10 paces the bullet dropped like a stone. But most fights never allowed distance. Encounters were sudden, intimate, and brutal. The .4, one rimfire short, thrived in those tight spaces. It wasn't a gunfighter's weapon or a lawman's sidearm. It was insurance for men who lived by cards, dice, and borrowed time. When a hand went bad and tempers flared, it offered one final advantage. By the 1890s, stronger centerfire cartridges and repeating pistols pushed it aside. Technology moved on, as it always did. Yet for a brief, dangerous window, the .41 rimfire short ruled the tables, the alleys, and the back rooms, giving desperate men a last chance when luck had already run out. 44. Merwin and Holbert. In a century ruled by Colts and Winchesters, Merwin and Holbert tried to rewrite the rules. Their nickel-plated revolvers were unlike anything else on the frontier, built with sliding barrels, tight tolerances, and precision machined parts more common to fine watches than working guns. Every feature was deliberate, and every feature depended on cartridges made exclusively for them. The flagship, 44 Merwin and Holbert, looked ordinary at first glance, but its cartridge told a different story. The case was slightly shorter than a 44 Russian and rimmed specifically to work with the company's unique extractor system. Loaded with black powder, it burned cleanly and delivered respectable stopping power, rivaling early .44 Colt loads. Contemporary gunwriters praised the revolvers as the gentleman's gun, smooth, refined, and elegant in an age of rough iron. But brilliance came at a price. Manufacturing was costly, and the ammunition fit no other firearm. Dealers hesitated to stock a cartridge that couldn't be sold twice. On the frontier, compatibility mattered more than craftsmanship. When Merwin and Holbert collapsed in the 1890s, their proprietary ammunition vanished almost overnight. Today, a handful of surviving cartridges sit behind glass, polished but silent, reminders that innovation alone couldn't guarantee survival, and that even in the Wild West, perfection sometimes arrived too early to last. 44 Russian. The 44 Russian wasn't meant for the Wild West. It was commissioned by the Imperial Russian Army, which wanted a revolver cartridge that hit harder and burned cleaner than the smoky black powder loads of the era. Smith & Wesson answered with a thick, rimmed case, a heavier bullet, and a carefully measured powder charge built for consistency rather than brute force. The results impressed everyone who tried it. The 44 Russian burned more efficiently, produced less fouling, recoiled smoothly, and delivered accuracy American shooters weren't used to seeing. When surplus revolvers and ammunition began reaching U.S. soil, frontier marksmen took notice. Hunters, target shooters, and lawmen along rivers and cattle trails started copying the load for their own six-shooters, chasing its balance of control and power. Its influence reached far beyond its own lifespan. The cartridge's precision and case design inspired later developments, directly shaping the 44 Special, and decades later, the legendary 44 Magnum. It quietly set the standard for what a big-bore revolver round could be. Though its prominence faded as smokeless powder and newer cartridges took over, the 44 Russian left a permanent mark. For a crucial generation, it proved that even in the roughest corners of the West, foreign engineering could outperform tradition, bringing accuracy, clean burning, and real stopping power before America had a truly modern revolver round of its own. 44 Evans. Some cartridges earned fame through war. The 44 Evans earned it through sheer audacity. It was created for the Evans repeating rifle, one of the strangest and most ambitious firearms of the frontier era. Instead of a tubular magazine under the barrel, the Evans used a helical magazine hidden inside the buttstock, a spiral feed system capable of holding up to 28 rounds, an almost unbelievable advantage in a world where most rifles held a fraction of that. To make the system work, the 44 Evans cartridge had to be short, bottlenecked, and carefully loaded with black powder and a heavy lead bullet. On paper, it promised overwhelming firepower. Settlers, scouts, and a handful of buffalo hunters tried it, stunned by how long the rifle could keep firing without a pause to reload. But reality caught up quickly. The complex magazine was sensitive to dirt and wear, and feeding problems were common under hard use. Worse, the odd cartridge worked in no other firearm. Ammunition had to be ordered directly from the factory, often from hundreds of miles away, an impossible luxury on the plains. When Evans' repeating rifle company collapsed, the .44 Evans vanished almost overnight. Today, it stands as a cautionary relic, proof that innovation alone couldn't conquer the frontier, and that capacity meant nothing without reliability. 32-20 Winchester. Practical, versatile, and quietly effective. The .3. 220 Winchester was the round cowboys reached for when dinner mattered more than duels. Light enough to be chambered in a revolver, yet far more capable in a rifle. It was ideal for dropping coyotes, varmints, and small game that threatened a ranch or wandered too close to camp. Ranchers and settlers valued its flexibility. One cartridge could feed a family, protect a homestead, or deal with predators along the trail. Ammunition was affordable, recoil was mild, and accuracy was good enough for everyday work. When supplies ran low, spent cases could be reloaded by hand in small-town smithies or at kitchen tables, keeping rifles and revolvers in service far from rail lines and factories. Its limits were well understood. The bullet lost energy quickly, sagging beyond a few dozen yards, and it offered little protection against large game or determined armed men. No one carried the .3 220 to make a name for himself. Yet, for daily survival, it was indispensable. It never made legends or filled dime novels, but it threaded quietly through frontier life for decades. In a West built on routine labor as much as violence, the .3220 Winchester proved that the right cartridge for ordinary work could be just as vital as the ones carried for glory or combat. 50-70 government. Before the 45-70 became standard, the plains echoed with the deep, unmistakable power of the 50-70 government. Designed for Springfield trapdoor rifles, it was a massive cartridge, driving a half-inch lead bullet with 70 grains of black powder behind it. One solid hit could drop a bison, a horse, or a man, earning it a brutal reputation among buffalo hunters and frontier scouts. The long brass case delivered raw authority, but at a cost. Recoil was punishing, and firing it well demanded strength, discipline, and steady aim. Soldiers carried it in surplus trapdoor rifles, hunters chambered it in sharps and other single shots, and settlers kept a few heavy rounds tucked away for moments when nothing smaller would suffice. Despite its power, the cartridge was straightforward to live with. Its large size made reloading simple, powder poured easily, bullets seated without delicate tools, and tolerances were forgiving in the field. Reliability mattered more than elegance on the plains. By the mid-1870s, lighter, flatter shooting cartridges like the 45-70 began to replace it, offering similar effectiveness with less punishment. Still, for a brief and decisive window, the 50-70 government gave the frontier a rare certainty. When a shot was taken, it was meant to end the matter, because across the open plains, one round could decide life or death. 44 to 77 Sharps. Before the Sharps rifle became legendary, it needed a cartridge worthy of its strength, and the 44-77 delivered. Introduced in 1869, it was the first American-made bottleneck rifle cartridge, carrying 77 grains of black powder behind a .44 caliber lead bullet. The design offered a flatter trajectory and harder impact than earlier straight-walled rounds, exactly what hunters on the open plains required. Buffalo hunters following the great herds across Kansas and Dakota Territory relied on the 44-77 for its balance of accuracy, power, and reliability. Sharp's rifles chambered for it became the professional hunter's tool of choice, used by men like William Buffalo Bill Cody and the crews supplying meat to expanding railroads and frontier towns. When a clean kill meant food, income, and survival, consistency mattered more than novelty. Black powder, however, imposed its limits. After repeated shots, fouling built up in the barrel, accuracy softened, and effective power declined beyond roughly 300 yards. Shooters had to clean often and pace their fire carefully. Even so, for a crucial period, the .44-77 defined buffalo hunting. It turned heavy single-shot rifles into precise instruments of sustenance, helping feed settlements pushing westward. Though later cartridges eventually surpassed it, the .44-77 Sharps left an unmistakable mark on the plains and secured its place in frontier history. 45-75 Winchester. When Winchester unveiled its new lever-action rifle in 1876, the .45-75 Winchester promised a leap forward in power and speed. It was a fat, bottlenecked cartridge, driving 75 grains of black powder behind a .45 caliber bullet, capable, at least in theory, of dropping buffalo, elk, or bandits in rapid succession. On paper, it looked like the perfect marriage of firepower and repetition. Frontier shooters soon discovered its limits. The heavy cartridge pushed the rifle's toggle link action to its edge, stressing parts not designed for such force. The short case also restricted how efficiently the powder charge could burn. During sustained fire, heat caused the brass to swell and stick in the chamber, slowing extraction and breaking the rifle's rhythm at the worst possible moment. Even with those flaws, the .45-75 found devoted users. It appealed to shooters who wanted power without giving up speed, including Theodore Roosevelt during his early hunting trips. For a brief time, it represented the cutting edge of lever gun ambition. Within a few years, more practical cartridges like the .45-70 and .5110 offered cleaner, more reliable performance, and the .45-75 slipped into obscurity. Today, it stands as a reminder of the frontier's restless experimentation, a cartridge that reached for both elegance and brute force, only to be overtaken by practicality. 56-56 Spencer rimfire. Before the Winchester lever action became a cowboy icon, the Spencer rifle and its .56-56 rimfire cartridge carried the weight of a nation. Crude by later standards, but revolutionary in its time, the round packed roughly 45 grains of black powder behind a heavy .52 caliber bullet, giving soldiers 7 rapid shots in an era still dominated by single-load muskets. On Civil War battlefields, Union cavalrymen armed with Spencers suddenly possessed more sustained firepower than any force the world had seen. Volume mattered, reloading mattered, and the Spencer delivered both. When the war ended, thousands of surplus rifles followed veterans west, finding new lives in the hands of settlers, scouts, and buffalo hunters pushing into unsettled territory. The .56 to .56 was self-contained, relatively weatherproof, and rugged enough for frontier conditions. Its blunt, heavy bullet struck hard at close range, hitting like a sledgehammer where fights were fast and distances short. But its limitations were clear. Ballistics were poor, and beyond roughly 100 yards, the bullet dropped quickly, trading reach for brute force. Still, for a brief and critical window, the Spencer and its cartridge changed expectations forever. They proved that repeating rifles were not novelties or experiments, but practical tools of survival. Long before precision ruled the West, the .56-56 Spencer showed that sometimes firepower alone was enough to open the frontier. 44 Henry rimfire. If one bullet earned a place in every Western museum, it's the .44 Henry rimfire. Designed for Benjamin Henry's repeating rifle, it was among the first truly reliable metallic cartridges ever produced. The brass case held 26 grains of black powder behind a 200-grain lead bullet. Ignited, by a rimfire primer instead of a fragile percussion cap. Simple, sturdy, and fully self-contained, it allowed shooters to fire 16 rounds in rapid succession without handling loose powder or paper. During the Civil War, Union soldiers wielded Henry rifles at battles such as Shiloh, unleashing volumes of fire that muzzle-loading muskets couldn't hope to match. After the war, the cartridge followed the frontier west. Settlers, scouts, and stagecoach guards depended on its reliability when reload speed meant survival. In 1866, Winchester refined the rifle and cartridge combination, giving rise to the famous Model 1866 Yellow Boy. The .44 Henry's short case limited its range and stopping power at distance. But on the frontier, speed often mattered more than reach. Close fights were decided by how fast a man could keep shooting. Long before the Peacemaker revolver or the .45-70 defined the West, the .44 Henry rimfire proved a radical truth. Repeating rifles worked. Once that lesson was learned, history and the frontier would never be the same. Brass-cased shotgun shells. Before smokeless powder or plastic hulls, the West relied on brass-cased shotgun shells. Tough, reloadable, and easy to seal against dust or rain, they fired everything from fine birdshot to heavy buckshot. Hunters loaded them by hand with powder, wad, and shot, sealing the mouth with candle wax or tallow to keep the charge dry and ready. When fired, the empty brass was too valuable to discard. It could be cleaned, reprimed, and reused dozens of times. An essential trait for settlers living days or weeks from the nearest supply town. One shell might take birds for supper in the morning and stand guard by nightfall. Stagecoach guards trusted them for brutal, close-range defense. Lawmen kept them behind bar counters or in jailhouse racks, ready when trouble crossed the threshold. Cavalry scouts even carried shortened versions tucked beneath saddle coats, compact and devastating at short distances. The shell didn't care who pulled the trigger or why. It simply worked. By the 1890s, lighter paper hull shells began to replace brass, cheaper to produce and easier to transport. Still, brass cases endured well into the new century, quietly serving those who valued reliability over novelty. Feeding families, defending lives, and surviving endless reloads, the brass-cased shotgun shell unified hunters, outlaws, and lawmen alike. One cartridge that truly ruled the frontier. 13 cartridges, from paper and pinfire to brass and buckshot. Each one tells the story of survival, innovation, and the relentless fight to stay alive on the frontier. Some vanished overnight. Others changed history in their brief moment. But all shaped the West in ways legends never could. The guns weren't what kept men alive. It was the ammunition in their hands. If you've made it this far, you know the truth behind the Wild West, beyond the myths and Hollywood tales. Hit like to show you appreciate the real history, share with someone who loves frontier stories, and subscribe to follow the next journey into forgotten weapons and the lives they shaped. Keep your powder dry. The next story digs even deeper into the ammunition the West tried to forget.